multi-time entrepreneur to the world's #1 inspirational speaker, empowering other entrepreneurs, also running a venture funds. Josh Linkner, welcome to the show.
I was born in the city of Detroit, and at age 13, I started sneaking into jazz clubs and trying to sit in, put myself through college playing music. I didn't come from an overly wealthy family. First and foremost, I kind of consider myself a jazz musician.
I did find similarities in athletics, being an athlete, being in the team environment. For people that aren't creative, how do they get started on their entrepreneurial journey?
You express your creativity on the basketball court, or when you're building companies, or when you're raising your beautiful family. And I know you're a terrific dad and husband. And so I think that there are opportunities to express creativity in non-traditional ways.
You're in control. You have the confidence in your skills. And of course, as an investor, you can do your homework. But at the end of the day, you're not the one closing the deal. You're not driving the train. How did you make that transition?
It really is a different mindset. The best way to describe that, actually, Adam, is that you're going from being a parent, where everything stops with you, and if the baby's throwing up at night, you got to deal with it, to being a grandparent, where you're, kind of advising the entrepreneur, AKA the parent, but you're not in the trenches at 2 a.m. You're not the one they call when the servers go down. But you're spreading your strategic capacity across multiple companies. And in our case, we tried to be very active investors.
So Josh, I want to thank you for being on the House of Bricks podcast. I've even learned more today, and I know our audience is going to benefit greatly from spending time with you. I'd like to welcome everybody to the House of Bricks podcast, where we teach people to use life's experiences for them and not carry them with them and let them weigh them down. And so we've had some incredible guests already, and I'm really excited to introduce our guest today, someone I've known for the last 13 years, and he's not a guy that's chasing accolades, but I have to tell people, Josh, who they're listening to. And so where to start, right? I could probably spend the whole podcast talking about some of your accomplishments, from being a New York Times bestseller to a multi-time entrepreneur to, I think, the world's #1 inspirational speaker, empowering other entrepreneurs, and also running a venture fund. So Josh Linkner, welcome to the show.
Adam, thanks so much. Great to be with you.
And so, as I mentioned previously, so the purpose of the House of Bricks podcast is to inspire people to use life's experiences for them. And I know, being an entrepreneur and the many businesses that you've started, and also coaching and leading other entrepreneurs, investing in them. I know you've made an investment in me personally. Tell us some of the experiences that you've had, probably start early on in your career. I know you're a musician as well. So tell us a little bit about you.
Well, you're so right. I mean, the whole premise that we are the amalgamation of our experiences, both good and bad. And actually, some of the biggest character leaps forward often come through those periods of adversity, not the periods of success. But you're right. I started my career as a jazz guitarist. I was born in the city of Detroit. And at age 13, I started sneaking into jazz clubs and trying to sit in, put myself through college playing music. I didn't come from a very overly wealthy family. And I've been playing ever since. So first and foremost, I kind of consider myself a jazz musician. And ironically, that sounds like a completely unrelated thing to business. But when you think about what we're facing today in business, we're in a world of ambiguity and volatility. There's a lot of unknowns. It's constant change. And that's exactly what we do when we play jazz. You're sort of responding to changing circumstances. You're adapting. You're collaborating with fellow colleagues. You're co-creating stuff. You're bouncing back from adversity. So frankly, jazz was my biggest teacher in business. I took that experience and started a company at age 20. And funny enough, I'd never taken a business course. I didn't know business. I just knew jazz. But in jazz, you kind of figure stuff out. You use your creativity and tenacity and figure things out. And that's what I did. My first company at age 20. And here we are 33 years later, 5 companies, 10,000 jobs created, bought and sold organizations, on and on. So ran 2 venture capital firms. But really, I can get more into detail, whatever you want. But for me, it gets back to jazz. I still play regularly. I've played over 1,000 concerts over the last now 40 years.
So yeah, I mean, that was a great summary. So, take us back. So are you skipping school? Are you, going in late? I mean, how are you getting into these jazz clubs at 13 years old?
Well, I was pretty, I fell in love with music, and it was this beautiful, to me anyway, a platform for creative expression and risk taking. And it was challenging, and I just loved it. And by the way, I will say that, I've been studying human creativity now for many years. And people often think, well, I'm not creative because I don't play an instrument, or I'm not creative because I can't paint or dance. And the truth is, we can all find our creative outlet. Mine happened to be music, but someone else's might be sales. Someone else's might be customer service or accounting or legal. So we can find opportunities to express creativity truly in any area of business and life. But yeah, for me, I got pretty disciplined about it. I would skip going out with my friends so I could practice. I was really I was really focused and working hard toward what I desired, which is being able to fully express myself musically. And yeah, I would sneak into clubs with I started playing in a wedding band. I got connected to a blues band, and I just got really into music. And when you're really into something, when you're passionate about it, you do whatever it takes to play. Like when I was in school, I first started in Boston. I would take 3 subways and a bus and carry all my gear on, and it would cost me like $30 to get there. They'd pay me $10 and a chicken dinner to play, but I didn't care. I did whatever it took to get practice and get exposure. And so I think that was one of the early lessons that transferred to entrepreneurship, is that you have to build your chops, you have to build into your expertise before you can truly monetize it.
So for me, I'm not creative in terms of music, very musically, challenged, so to speak. But I did find similarities in athletics, right? Being an athlete, being in the team environment. For people that aren't creative, how do they get started on their entrepreneurial journey? I mean, does every entrepreneur have to invent something new, or can you take something that's out in the market and do it in a better way?
So first, one thing I'll challenge you on, my friend, because I've known you for a long time, is I think you're wildly creative. You express your creativity on the basketball court, or when you're building companies, or when you're raising your beautiful family. And I know you're a terrific dad and husband. And so I think that there are opportunities to express creativity in non-traditional ways. It doesn't have to be doing interpretive dance or painting oil on canvas. So, and I would just bring that up, not only because I think highly of you, but I think many people listening don't recognize the amount of creativity that they have, and they can apply it again in non-traditional ways. So as an entrepreneur, I do think you need some creativity, because you're always navigating challenges and setbacks. It's sort of a blood sport. I would say you're not an entrepreneur until you got punched in the face and got knocked down. Then the entrepreneurial journey begins. But again, it doesn't mean you have to invent some crazy new thing, cure to cancer, or be able to write code. Your creativity might be taking an existing business model and finding a better way to serve customers, or reduce costs, or hire talented people. So I do think it requires creativity, but the kind that we all have. I mean, all of us. And it requires this sort of tenacity and willingness to adapt to changing conditions, coupled with an undying commitment to getting to the other side of the challenge, no matter what.
So I'll take on your challenge for creative dance, and maybe for our next episode, I'll have some clips of me doing creative dance. So I know, I'm not sure if you jumped straight into ePrize, but that's kind of the first business that I know of. I think you had a partner in that business as well. How did you get into ePrize? And were you guys 50-50 partners? Because I know our listeners out there, are always looking to decide, what business do I go in? Do I raise capital? Should I have my partner? What the split is. So help us a little bit, just to understand kind of how you got started in ePrize and what the relationship was.
Yeah, so ePrize was actually my third company. I started a company at age 20 called Gator Computer Systems, because I was studying at the University of Florida at the time. And again, I didn't know what I was doing, but I sort of started building computers in my college apartment. I was a little bit of a tech nerd, and would sell them on campus as a completed system. Eventually, I took a year off college and sort of built up this business a bit. I did go to college. That was your previous question. Although I should say I attended, but barely. I mean, I was running this company in the middle of the day and playing jazz gigs at night, and barely showing up to class. I somehow managed to squeak on through. But I do have a college degree, although I should have probably applied more effort to that. So my first company, I just had this idea. Like, at the time, you couldn't buy a discount computer easily. You couldn't go to Best Buy. And I realized that I could mail order individual components, assemble them in my apartment, and sell them at a profit. And by the way, that was an interesting idea. But the first thing that happened is I screwed it up. Like, I built bad computers and I had quality issues and I couldn't sell them at a right price and I was losing money. And so I just want people to know, when you look at a successful person, you sort of envision, oh, they had all the answers right away. Everything was like, from the time they had the idea in the shower, they were whisked off in a limousine to fame and fortune. That is rarely the case. Usually what happens is someone has an idea, and the minute they hit reality, it's hard. It's, you have some type of setback. So I just want to encourage people, if your ride isn't going as smooth as it is in the movies, don't worry, that's natural. And that's what happens to all of us. I sold that company to an investor group. I started another company similar when I graduated, and I started doing a bunch of networking and not networking like making friends, but computer networking for clients. And one of my suppliers liked my client base and bought me out early. So I was only in that business for 11 months. It wasn't a huge exit, but I learned a lot and made a little bit of money. And right then, the internet starts coming around. So the internet is like, wow, what's this fanciful thing? And in 1995, I started an internet company. And the internet company, we would build websites. And Adam, I'm not kidding. I would call on companies. I'm like, hey, do you have a website? And they're like, what's a website? Right. I was like, no, there's like 10 million people online, like 10 million. Of course, now there's billions. But right. I got in early. And by the way, I think one of the entrepreneurial mandates is that we're not just building a business for where things are, it's where things are headed. And at that time, there was no data to suggest that the internet was a good place to do business, but it didn't take a genius to figure out that everyone was going to need a website. So I started that in 95. I built it up. I sold it to a public company in 1999. And then I started ePrize. So I'm sorry, ePrize is actually my fourth company, not my third. And so by the time I started that company, I had already gotten some reps in. And you know this for being such an incredible athlete, that you don't want to, do your most important game without the practice. A lot of the athletic success you've had is through practice. I got 3 reps in before I did a bigger company. And those weren't giant. I mean, like, I made some money, but they weren't huge. But by the time I got to ePrize in 1999, I had already built a pretty deep reservoir of skills. And the answer to your other question, I started ePrize myself. I was the sole founder. I did not have a partner. Over time, I took on some investors, but I was the sole founder and CEO.
All right. So you started ePrize, and I read, I do like to do homework. I didn't do it in high school, but I'm doing it now. Some of your accounts, Josh, that you had Coca-Cola, some of these blue chip companies. So I remember in the businesses that I've started, everyone wants to see those logos on their customer on their website, on their customer slide. Did you go after those accounts first, or did you work your way up to those? Because you can spend a lot of energy going after the blue chips, and oftentimes they work you the most on price and have the longest sales cycle, where there are opportunities for the small and medium-sized clients.
Well, funny enough, when I started ePrize in 1999, the stock market was soaring. Everything was .com, And so I really started going after .com companies that I thought were going to take over the world. Well, as we know, the .com crash happens. Petfood.com can't pay their bills. So I had to go after the bigger companies. So I had to make a pretty significant pivot. And I just reinforce that, a lot of entrepreneurship is responding and adapting to change. And so I had to really retool my company to go after bigger brands. What I did is I fought like hell to get my first one. I think it was maybe Hilton or something. And the minute I got like the teeniest little project from Hilton, my next sales call is, oh, you've probably seen our work for Hilton, And so you're right. You have to leverage the credibility once you start, getting some big clients. But I'm glad you mentioned Coke, because it's also an instructive, obviously House of Bricks is based on what your experience is. So the marquee account for any marketing company is Coca-Cola, biggest brand in the world or whatever. So for years, I'm trying to get in there, years and years and years, nothing, doors slammed in your face. I was persistent. Eventually, we got this teeny little project, like this little micro opening, like $1,000 project or something. But you got to you got to crack the window. And so once I got in the window, we're working really, really hard and building and building and building. So the entrenched person that was doing all their promotions at the time, ePrize was a promotion company, was this company that had been around forever. And funny enough, the company is called DL Blair. They had an ad in a print ad in the trade journals that said a lot of things have changed since 1959. DL Blair isn't one of them. And I think they were trying to communicate stability, but we thought this was the funniest thing ever. So we photocopied it, put it all over our office, like, whoa, we're taking them down. So it gave us something to aim for. So eventually we work our way into Coca-Cola and work. And eventually the folks at DL Blair got a letter. Dear DL Blair, Thank you so much for your 25 years of serving the Coca-Cola company. We are respectfully pulling out of all business with you, and we've awarded the entire Coca-Cola account to a small company in Detroit called ePrize. And of course, we framed that, they sent us a copy and we framed it and all that. But on the one hand, I was very proud, like we worked hard for that. But it also, the reason we kept it front and center is that we can't get cocky. Like D.L. Blair was a very successful company, and they eventually rested on their laurels, and that was their demise. In our case, we took that really seriously. So we kept saying to ourselves, and that was a good exhibit A, that someday a company will come along and put us out of business. It might as well be us. So we didn't get cocky from that letter. It was the opposite. We got hungry from that letter. We want to say, like, we're not getting a letter like that. And if anyone, Coca-Cola sending that letter, we better be the source of disruption rather than having it thrust upon us.
No, and that's great. And that was actually something I was going to ask you. So like I said, I've known you for 13, 14 years. And when I meet you, you have a confidence about you, like the story that you just told us, but you balance it very well with not being arrogant. You've accomplished a lot, writing books, speaking, exiting businesses, investing in startups. How did you develop that characteristic?
Well, thanks, man. And I think you're another beautiful example of that. You've achieved remarkable success in multiple domains, and you're heart forward and humble and sincere and kind and exhibit generosity. And that's one of the reasons I think not only but I think so many people love you. For me, it's probably my biggest pet peeve is when people present and they show up with arrogance, they're condescending. And like, why do you do that? I mean, to me, if you have your own, I think quiet confidence instead of boastfulness is a way better vibe. And I don't do it as an act, but like for me, I'm always learning. I've got tons of flaws. I screw stuff up all the time. I'm a moron. Just ask my wife, like we're all doing life and business and doing our best. And I screw things up. And so I have no business being arrogant or cocky about anything. I've learned a couple things and I like to share what I've learned to help other people. But I'm still learning and growing. And to me, that sort of white belt attitude is how people continue to grow and thrive. The minute you start to say, oh, I'm a master, I've learned all the lessons, look at me. To me, that's the beginning of the end.
Right. And is that something you developed over time? I know I've evolved as a leader, definitely from my early 20s to starting making money, coming out of Rock Financial, Rocket Mortgage, then starting my own business. And, you had kind of an iron fist. Well, I say I led with an iron fist, and you can only get people so far with that type of leadership, and also how you run your own life. Was that something you've developed over time, or were you always carrying these types of characteristics?
I think I'm maybe just a little oversensitive. So I think when people say harsh things to me, it hits me in the heart. I don't like it. I'm sure nobody likes it, but I maybe have thin skin instead of thick skin. And so, but knowing how it feels when someone is berating me or being arrogant, I just try to think like, why would I want someone else to feel that way, Right. And so I think early on, I just from my own experiences, because we all experience, harshness and difficulty. And I thought, wouldn't it be nicer to make people feel good instead of bad? But the other thing I'll say back to jazz is that you learn a lot in jazz. So like jazz is more about listening, at least as much about listening as it is playing. So, which requires, empathy and trying to understand how someone's feeling. So let's say you're playing a saxophone solo and I'm playing guitar. In that moment, my job is to support you and make you shine, not me to shine. And so I might hear you playing a C sharp. And so I might try to voice a chord with a C sharp on top to make your C sharp sound even better. And so you're really trying to tune in to what other people are doing and how they're feeling and how you can help support them. And then when it's my turn to solo, you would do that for me. And so I think that just the mere act of collaboration that happens in real time during jazz was also an instructive tutor, really, in helping to develop skills of listening and empathy.
No, that's a great summary. And so back to ePrize, and now we're kind of moving around a little bit, but you've accomplished a lot, and there's a lot of chapters to the story. And so it's one thing to start a business. It's another thing to scale it. You brought on a partner, you brought on outside capital, and then you're actually able to exit the business. And so you mentioned before, and that's really what this podcast is all about, is for our listeners to find meaning and fulfillment during the journey. And a lot of people set their goals and defer happiness to the exit or whatever it is they're trying to accomplish. A lot of times when you get there, in fact, most of the time, when you reach that pinnacle, the dopamine release is a lot less than the actual process of going through it. So when you exited your company, was it all that you thought it would be? And did you experience any darkness or kind of downside after that because you've wrapped up a lot of your identity in that process?
Great question. For me, I think you're right. You as an entrepreneur, you're thinking about this exit where you're like you're end of the rainbow and everybody's tan and fit and the birds are chirping, and all that. And that is a bit of a false god. I think that, I was proud of the exit. I mean, we made, a good amount of money for our investors and everything. And I did pretty well, but it wasn't this panacea that I think most people are envisioning. For me, I didn't have the aftershock because I was sort of ready to take on the next chapter. Right after coming out of ePrize, I started Detroit Venture Partners with two notable partners, Dan Gilbert and Brian Hermelin. And so I was pretty excited about my next chapter. So I was proud of what we built, but I wasn't like longing for the good old days because I was busy creating the next one. Some people are very past oriented. They spend a lot of time thinking about regret or even past accomplishments. I really let go of the past, for good and bad probably, but I'm always thinking about what's next. And so I was able to let go of that. I'll tell you though, real quickly, what was more moving and fulfilling than getting a wire transfer at the end was the impact that I made along the way. I named my current venture fund, and you know this, Adam, Mudita Venture Partners, Mudita. Mudita is a Sanskrit term, which means taking joy in other people's success. So like, Adam, when I see you blossoming as a leader and a podcast host and all these things, I'm like, I'm so deeply happy for you. That gives me more joy than some, external marker. And so as I was building ePrize, when we had someone come into my office and said, hey, Josh, I've been at this company for 2 years. You might not even know my first name. I was the first person to go to college in my family. And because of this job, I just bought my first house. That gave me more fulfillment than signing the documents when we sold the company.
Right. So you moved right into Detroit Venture Partners. And again, you've changed, I don't want to call it change directions, but you've had success in a lot of different directions in life, business, investment, music, being an author, going from an entrepreneur. It was your fourth business. Now you're trying to determine what other entrepreneurs that you're going to invest in. So totally different hat you're wearing, because as the entrepreneur, you're in control. You have the confidence in your skills. And of course, as an investor, you can do your homework. But at the end of the day, you're not the one closing the deals. You're not driving the train. How did you make that transition? Totally different mindset.
It really is a different mindset because you're not just putting everything you have into one company. You're spreading it out across many. The best way to describe that, actually, Adam, is that you're going from being a parent where everything stops with you, and if the baby's throwing up at night, you got to deal with it, to being a grandparent where you're kind of advising the entrepreneur, aka the parent, but you're not in the trenches at 2 a.m. You're not the one they call when the servers go down, but you're spreading your strategic capacity across multiple companies. And in our case, we tried to be very active investors. For some, venture capital is, find good entrepreneurs, find good deals, and your work ends once you make the investment. For us, our work began once you made the investment. So it's about really being active participants and helping those entrepreneurs, not doing the job for them, but helping them, and trying to apply some of the lessons and hard-fought lessons that we had along the way. Many of the mistakes that we made, help those entrepreneurs avoid those mistakes and accelerate growth. But you're right, it was an adjustment and a different mindset, but also very fulfilling. When a company struggles, you feel it, of course, in your heart. But once it wins, like that's so fulfilling. Back to this notion of mudita, taking joy in other people's success. A venture capital investor should be filled with mudita if they're successful.
For our listeners that are out there that currently have a business and are trying to raise capital, what does a venture fund look for in a business? And because I know you're seeing hundreds of decks a month, probably. What's your selection process?
So just quick disclaimer, different venture firms have different selection criteria. So I can share mine, but it's not like the end all be all. For us, we look at a number of different factors. First thing, if you triage an inbound deal is it on thesis to our fund? So we invest in early stage software companies that are generally B2B, not consumer companies, and that are post revenue and pre-growth spurt. So if someone came with like a medical device, it could be the greatest company in the world. It just, that's not our focus. So we would pass on it, not because they're a bad company or a bad entrepreneur, it's just not our thing. If someone came to me and said, hey, I have a consumer app and I need $100 million, again, it could be awesome, but it's just not our thing. So I think the first thing a venture firm does is does a match to say, hey, we have an investment thesis. Does this entrepreneur and their company match our investment thesis? Then let's just say it does. You look at a number of factors, or at least I do. We kind of like to say, the jockey, the horse, and the race. So if you think about the jockey, that's the entrepreneur and the team. And it's not, we look for different things. So it's not, is the person larger than life and do they look like Steve Jobs? It's more like, do they have that, back to that quiet humility and confidence? Have they proven that they can execute? Are they open-minded? Are they willing to share success with others? Are they coachable? And so those are the things that we look for in the leadership in the team. Are they creative? Are they adaptable? Do they demonstrate tenacity and follow through? Then the horse, quote unquote, is the business itself. And we say, okay, is the technology good? Does it solve a real need? Is there a competitive advantage or a moat that could be built around the competitive advantage? How much capital is it going to take to get there? How's it going so far? Do they have a good product market fit? So you're really examining, quote unquote, the horse is the business and the tech that they're presenting. And then the race, you can remember jockey horse race. The race is the external market conditions. Is it a big market or a small market? Is it a growing market or a shrinking market? Is it highly competitive? Or do we have a chance to get to the top of the field? And so we look at, it's a multidimensional analysis looking at the team, of course, the operators, the business itself, and the market in which they're competing.
And so you gave those in a specific order. Are any of those more important than the other? How important is previous success? Because that is a common thing that I do hear in the investment world. We're betting the jockey, not the horse. So are those weighted in any certain way? Or it's the combination, or is it on a case-by-case basis?
Great question. We have like this whole quantitative analysis tool. It's pretty funny. We call it the FYI, which sounds really benign. But for us, when we make an investment, my partners and I, we have this saying, if it's not an F, yes, it's a no. So FYI stands for F, yes, index. I'll be polite today and won't say the whole word. But so for us, we really do look at all three of those factors. But if I had to weight them, I would weight the operator, the people. It's really funny, man. I made Detroit Venture Partners. I made two investments almost at the same time, and they were really similar. They were both $600,000. I remember it very clearly. Investment one, we had an A-level entrepreneur. It was like a C-level idea. Investment two, we had an A idea and like a C-level team. And like clockwork, the A person figures out how to make their C idea an A idea, and it became a top performing investment in our fund. Like clockwork, the other one, the C team managed to squander their opportunity and blow up their A idea, and we lost everything. It was that stark. One became like a star of our portfolio. The other one, I lost every dime of my investment. So I do tend to weight the person over the deal, but ideally you want to have enthusiasm across all three dimensions.
Previously, you had said something that I wanted to touch on. So during the fundraising process, you can go to one VC and they give you feedback. Hey, you're too far along. We only invest in early stage companies. Then you go down the street, right? And they're saying, you're not far enough along. We want to track you. You need more features in the product. It's going to cost too much to build all these features. As an entrepreneur or CEO, and you're in that fundraising and capital raising process, how much do you weight the advice you get in these meetings and investment opportunities, and how much do you stay the course and in what your plan is?
Really thoughtful question, and there's no perfect answer to it. I think anytime you're getting constructive feedback, it's always helpful to listen. I think I just look at it as inputs and like it's data. Why wouldn't you want to consider someone who's successful and their opinion on it? At the same time, I do see entrepreneurs tend to overcorrect, and that may not be a smart thing to do. So, for example, like I like jazz music, and let's say you're doing a country band, and my feedback to you is, hey, Adam, like you should use more really complicated and advanced chords. And that might be terrible advice. I mean, I'm biased because I'm a jazz musician. In this case, I'm projecting my bias to you, and that would inherently dilute the potency of your music. And so I think entrepreneurs also are artists. And at some point, you have to make artistic choices. You have to decide what feedback you're going to listen to, what feedback you're going to ignore. So again, listen to all the feedback, but I wouldn't, just because one person says no, it doesn't mean you have to like swing the pendulum the other way and overcorrect. Just listen to the feedback and then make a thoughtful, intentional decision about what, if any, of that feedback you're going to embrace. You're exactly right. There's a taste to it. Like someone might say you're too early, someone might say you're too late. Exactly as you described, doesn't mean you're too early or too late for the right investor. It just means you weren't for those investors. So hard part, and I try to encourage entrepreneurs to consider, is that instead of thinking in a judgment way, I'm good or bad, I'm successful or I'm failure. These are things that we internalize and it hurts our soul. Just think about it as is it in alignment or not in alignment? So if you came to my fund and pitched me a healthcare, a new drug formula to cure cancer, I might say it's just not in alignment with my fund. But so for you, don't take that as I'm a bad entrepreneur and this business will never succeed. It's just like, okay, that didn't align with those people's investment criteria. And I think it's a healthier way for entrepreneurs because that rejection can sting. We have our identities tied up in some idea and someone says no, that doesn't feel good. So I think the best thing I can recommend is try to separate your own personal identity from that feedback and just look at it as data. And then you can intentionally decide what, if any, of that new data to embrace.
I hope people are listening to this. And if you didn't take notes during that last 2 minutes, there's probably millions of dollars worth of advice in there that I've learned over the last 25 years. You've, again, invested in hundreds of startups, started your own companies. So people are listening, that right there, having that confidence, staying the course, but also being able to receive feedback, process it, make decisions, read, react, and continue to make progress. That really is the secret to being an entrepreneur. So I know we've covered your entrepreneurial background, your investment background. You also decided to write 3 or 4 books. I know I've read Disciplined Dreaming. So as an entrepreneur, being able to focus, right? You have a lot of ideas and vision, but it's how to implement that vision and those dreams in a disciplined way that really separates the successful entrepreneurs from the ones that are continually chasing and looking for shiny objects and really aren't moving the needle. So talk to us a little bit about Disciplined Dreaming.
Yeah, thanks. So, starting my career as a jazz musician and then becoming an entrepreneur, the one thing I always thought I was pretty good at was creativity. I'm a lousy financial manager. I suck at details. Believe me, I have so many flaws, but I was always pretty creative. And I thought, could in jazz, there's actually a process to bring out creativity. It isn't like some guy plugs or girl plugs their heart into God, which translates through their instrument. It's not like divine. There's actually, a process. There's an approach. So I wanted to write a book that helped business people cultivate creativity. A disciplined way to bring the imagination out, not for the fun of it, but to drive better outcomes. And so Disciplined Dreaming was my first book. It was a proven model to drive breakthrough creativity. I've since written 3 others, and all on that same topic is how do you sort of tap into this amazing gift that all humans have of creativity and ingenuity and inventive thinking and creative problem solving. And it's not a book about how do you become an artist. It's a book about how do you apply those principles to drive better outcomes in your business and your life. And it's been a wonderful process, both writing, when you try to master something, the best thing they always say is try to teach it. And so you got to get your thoughts pretty well organized. And then it's been a beautiful gift to share those ideas and frameworks and tools with thousands of audiences around the world. And knowing that you're making a difference in their lives and their businesses, it's intrinsically very rewarding.
What makes entrepreneurs is having ideas. It's wanting to be disruptive. Are there a couple things, and I encourage everyone to go out and read the book, purchase the book. I've read it a couple times. And are there a couple things you can give people just in a practical way? I'm running my business right now. I feel like I'm doing a lot of things, but I don't have discipline. How do I develop that? Give us a couple things we can take away from today.
Sure, and I appreciate you saying that. So that was my first book. My most recent book, it's called Big Little Breakthroughs: How Small Everyday Innovations Drive Oversized Results. The reason I bring this up is that it's actually probably more applicable to entrepreneurs than Disciplined Dreaming. There was some value in that first book too, but the reason I bring this up is there's actually a framework that I have in this book. I'm just pulling it up right now, where I explore the 8 core obsessions of everyday innovators, and they actually translate perfectly to entrepreneurs. Real quickly, number one, fall in love with the problem, not the solution. Number two, start before you're ready. Number three, open a test kitchen, which is around a mindset of experimentation. Number four, break it to fix it, which is around disrupting assumptions and challenging conventional wisdom rather than complying with it. Number five is reach for weird, which is sort of going out on a creative limb and trying things that are a little bit unorthodox. Number six is around using every drop of toothpaste, which is really a playful way of saying being scrappy and resourceful, something that all entrepreneurs need to do. Number seven, don't forget the dinner mint, which is around adding a little extra something, a little dose of creativity that can take your product or service or company to the next level. And then finally, number eight, fall 7 times, stand 8, which is around perseverance and tenacity and resilience. So I think actually that even though the book is focused around innovation, I think that provides a perfect model for entrepreneurs. And again, it's called Big Little Breakthroughs, how small everyday innovations drive oversized results.
Yeah. So currently I'm, doing this podcast, obviously, but also working with CEOs and entrepreneurs from a coaching perspective. And one of the things that is a very common thread in the coaching process is people are afraid to make the right decision. And so they don't make any decisions at all. And the thing I tell people is decisions create action, action creates feedback. It's the ability to read and react and continue to make progress is really what separates successful people from the ones that aren't. Would you agree with that?
I think it's exactly right. And it's not like just some divine intervention, you being a super genius. It's about, like you said, the tenacity, adaptability, taking on those challenges, following through, and rinse and repeat. It's funny. The word entrepreneur sounds like some fancy French word where you're holding tea, sipping tea in white gloves, and there's lilies in the background, and it's more like a street fight. I mean, it's more like it's difficult, hard work, but through that perseverance, you don't have to be the smartest guy in the room, but a lot of the times you have to have the most tenacity.
And what are you doing now? So I know you have Mudita Ventures. You're still speaking. I see that on social media. And then you're also helping people that want to become keynote speakers. So I've watched several of your keynote speeches in the past. If you haven't seen Josh, you have to check them out because they're engaging, they're creative, they're inspirational, but they're also filled with a lot of takeaways for people that are very applicable as an entrepreneur. So in addition to Mudita Ventures, what are you doing now?
Well, thanks for asking. It's funny. I'm probably working harder than I ever have and more hours than I ever have, but I do it because I love it, not because I have to. A lot of times, someone asked me just yesterday about the notion of retirement. And if you're doing a job that you hate and you're punching the clock and trading your soul for money, for sure you want to retire. That's all you can think about. But if you're instead following your calling and pouring your heart in like solving tough challenges and making a difference in people's lives, you never want to retire. And I'm more in that second category, frankly. So I have 3 buckets of professional activity right now. I am the managing partner of Mudita Venture Partners. As mentioned, we invest in early stage software companies. So that's time consuming, and we're in it. We raised $40 million, and we're making investments across a wide range of interesting companies for the next generation of entrepreneurs and disruptors. The second bucket is around innovation, my creativity, my passion. So I've written 4 books. I speak all over the world. I've done 1,200 keynotes around the world, and this year I'll do 75 keynotes or whatever. So I really enjoy that. I enjoy sharing ideas. We also have a small consulting practice that helps companies build a culture of innovation. So that's sort of bucket number 2. And bucket number 3 is I'm one of the founding partners of a company called Impact 11, helping thought leaders take their impact, well, you guessed it, on a scale from 1 to 10, all the way to 11. And we help people launch and scale their speaking practice. We help them develop content. We help them build expertise that they can share on stage, but they can also share in podcasts, or they can, sort of thought leadership can manifest in a number of different ways in books and YouTube videos as an influencer. And so we're helping thought leaders, again, launch and scale their practice, ultimately to monetize their expertise. And so I get 3 full-time jobs, said more simply.
Yeah, and you're not doing any of them as a hobby. When I see you do something, you're all in. How do you balance those 3 things? Are you doing one thing a certain day? Is it about building the right team around you? How do you stay organized?
Yeah, it's not Monday's Impact 11 day, Tuesday is speaking day. They all kind of mush together. The one thing that's kind of neat is they're all synergistic. So I might give a keynote to Coca-Cola, and then Coca-Cola might have some like tech spin out that I can invest in. And then one of their leaders wants to become a thought leader. So they come to Impact 11. So each of the businesses that I'm involved in, there's some interconnectivity. They're not completely disparate. It's not like I'm selling life insurance and running an auto mechanic shop. Like they connect in certain ways. But I think the answer to your question is two things. It's compartmentalization. So like right now, I'm trying to be deeply present with you and we're hanging out and I love our conversation. I'm not thinking about, oh, this investment deck that I got to read or some, negotiation I'm involved in. So I think, being able to compartmentalize is one important thing, really, of all entrepreneurs. The other thing, and it sounds like cheesy, but it really is true, and you know this from being in sports, is having great folks around you. I have a full-time CEO for my consulting firm. I have a full-time CEO for Impact 11. So we have multiple full-time people in Mudita Venture Partners. And so because of that, I'm able to sort of bounce from one to the other, knowing that we have full-time people that are doing nothing but building each of those individual businesses. And I've got wonderful people around me that they keep me on track and help me move crazy things down the field.
And so as we wrap up here, first of all, I encourage everyone to pick up Josh's most recent book, Big Little Breakthroughs. If you haven't seen him speak, go on YouTube. I know you have your website, joshlinkner.com. What's the website for keynote speakers, if you want to share that with our audience as well?
Yeah. It's Impact 11. So just the word impact, IMPACT, and then 11 is spelled out, ELEVEN. So impact11.com. And again, the whole notion is that people have an important message and they want to get it out to the world and ultimately want to monetize their ability and kind of perfect their stage skills and such. We might be able to be helpful. So happy to chat with anyone who's interested.
In conclusion, again, the purpose of the podcast is how to use life's experiences for you, because like you said, you don't spend time focusing on the past, which can include, and I know you've met these people you meet at a cocktail party or a networking reception. It's always, hey, I started this company in 1999. It's like, you need a new story. So even good experiences can weigh you down and prevent you from future progress. What's one thing that you've used to continue to push forward in your career?
Well, as kind of calling back to our discussion earlier, I said this phrase that we said at our company that someday a company is going to come along and put us out of business. It might as well be us. I apply that same principle personally. So the way that you translate that is, someday someone's going to come along and put me out of business. It might as well be me. So what I'm trying to do, and it's not easy, and I'm not perfect, of course not, but how do you put the previous version of yourself out of business? About every 6 months. So what does the Adam of 6 months from now look like that's going to render the current Adam obsolete? And so it's sort of this notion of constant reinvention, not arriving in success can be a really bad teacher because it reminds us that, hey, we've cracked the code. We don't need to change. And boy, nothing is further from the truth because the world is around us is changing at a rate like none other in history. And I think as leaders, as entrepreneurs, we have a calling to constantly find the next best version of ourselves. And that's a never-ending process. And that shouldn't be depressing. It should be exciting because we're always kind of finding and discovering another layer. That's what I try to do. Back to that white belt mentality. I try to never sit around saying, oh, yeah, I've got all this success. I'll spike the ball. If we have a win, that's awesome. But I'm always thinking about what's next and how do you lean into change. And I, by the way, just personally, I'm trying to take my frailties head on. I'm impatient sometimes. I'm judgmental at times. And I'm trying to look in the mirror and say, how can I be a better person? How can I have better character? How can I be a better dad? And so it's not, to me, that's exciting. That's what life is all about is this ongoing discovery of yourself and trying to shape yourself into a better version. And that's what I've tried to do for the last 33 years in business. And I will continue to try to do going forward.
Well, that's my takeaway for today is for Christmas, my gift to myself is going to be a new version of myself. So I'm setting a goal. I'll actually put it on my calendar. What did Adam look like 6 months ago? And what does he look like now? So I'm going to have my podcast. I'll be keynote speaking. I'm going to start a book and continue to inspire entrepreneurs. So Josh, I want to thank you for being on the House of Bricks podcast. Always a pleasure talking to you. It's hard to get in a room without you or with you and not learn something. So I've even learned more today, and I know our audience is going to benefit greatly from spending time with you. So I appreciate it.
Adam, thank you. And thanks for doing this podcast. You're really giving a beautiful gift to the world and really helping people elevate and shine. So thanks for that contribution. Thanks for our friendship and wishing you continued success.
Thanks, Josh. Your accomplishments, from being a New York Times bestseller to a multi-time entrepreneur to the world's #1 inspirational speaker, empowering other entrepreneurs, also running a venture funds. Josh Linkner, welcome to the show.
I was born in the city of Detroit, and at age 13, I started sneaking into jazz clubs and trying to sit in, put myself through college playing music. I didn't come from an overly wealthy family. First and foremost, I kind of consider myself a jazz musician.
I did find similarities in athletics, being an athlete, being in the team environment. For people that aren't creative, how do they get started on their entrepreneurial journey?
You express your creativity on the basketball court, or when you're building companies, or when you're raising your beautiful family. And I know you're a terrific dad and husband. And so I think that there are opportunities to express creativity in non-traditional ways.
You're in control. You have the confidence in your skills. And of course, as an investor, you can do your homework. But at the end of the day, you're not the one closing the deals. You're not driving the train. How did you make that transition?
It really is a different mindset. The best way to describe that, actually, Adam, is that you're going from being a parent, where everything stops with you, and if the baby's throwing up at night, you got to deal with it, to being a grandparent, where you're, kind of advising the entrepreneur, aka the